Human beings have always sought to answer questions about life and the meaning of life. For much of history, religion was the main source of answers.
But now that science has been able to explain so much to us, is there a role left for religion?
In this episode, Templeton Prize-winning mathematician and physicist George Ellis helps us answer the question, has science replaced religion? Today we're going to examine two things, science and religion and their relationship. Are these two ways of explaining the same thing, Ken?
Oh, well, I think science is a way of explaining things and, potentially everything. I'm kind of a scientific guy, I have to admit. And religion, well, I don't know what business it's in, but I don't think it has much explanatory work to do, John.
So you just one of these young guys that thinks that science is going to explain everything, and that'll be that.
Well, I'm not so young anymore. What I am is a post-Darwinian, I think, and a thoroughly modern guy. I mean, there was a time when you could have believed that, like the design argument for the existence of God was a good explanation of why there are people and animals with all these complexes. But I don't think anybody post-Darwinian can believe that anymore.
Let's stop a minute and talk about what the design argument is, or I should say the design arguments. There's a very old argument, and I would guess it's the argument for the existence of God that has won the most adherents to religion.
I think that's probably right.
And that's the idea that if you look around the world and you see all the complexity and the way that things seem to be designed for each other, fruit trees seem to be designed for people to eat. We are incredibly more complex than the most complicated machine, and no one would ever come across a machine and say, "Oh, that just happened." So that argument, the classic design argument, is the one to which you refer.
Yeah, but I think Darwin explains that capacity without explain that complexity without positing an intelligent designer. So it's just,
what do you mean positing?
Without supposing that there is.
That's why I use a $5
Yeah,
word.
you were referring to some other design argument.
Well, there's an argument that says, okay, I'll give you that, but evolution itself, the possibility of evolution, the possibility of a universe, anything like the one we have that could support life, depends on the fine-tuning of lots of physical constants.
Yeah.
And what's the explanation for that? Why do we have a universe where the law of gravity and the nature of space-time is just suited for evolution to occur?
Oh, it's luck, I think, probably. Just random chance or something like that. Look, I'm going to concede something. I'm not saying, when I say science can explain everything, I'm not saying that every question is a scientific question. I mean, when science ends, there's still stuff left over. And, there's ethics, there's what's good and bad, how should I live my life? So science doesn't do everything there is to do.
This is good, Ken. We've been at it for 2 minutes, and you're already conceded a lot. You're no longer a simple-minded scientist to a more well-rounded philosopher. Listen to the piece from Amy Standen, our roving philosophical reporter.
Ask anyone who's devoted his life to a single pursuit, and there's usually a story behind it. This is Bob Russell's.
I was always just fascinated with science. Got a telescope when I was a kid, a Bosch and Lomb spotterscope, and saw Saturn the first night and called Dad outside and said, "Look, that's Saturn." And he said, "Oh, no, it can't be Saturn, you're just beginning." I said, "No, it's Saturn, take a look," and it was Saturn. It was cool. So I was always very at home in nature. I knew the planets backwards when I was a kid. I used to tell people the names of them in reverse order, because I loved space so much. And I always wanted to be the first person on Mars. Dad died suddenly when I was 12, and that really sent a lot of complications into my life. After a few months, I got up the nerve to ask the Episcopal minister, or priest really, about Dad in heaven, because the minister and I had been very close. I had been an acolyte and knew him very well. So Mom invited him for dinner, and afterwards I took him out to my shop, then asked him, will I see Dad in heaven? And he put his hand on my shoulder. I said, "Bob, because of science, we don't believe in heaven anymore." Really kind of a devastating thing to say. I think I realized that he was trying to be honest with me and not give me false hopes. I realized that it couldn't be true. The God I believe in is a God of love and compassion who created me and created my dad and my mom, and wouldn't abandon my dad or my relation with my dad just because the conceptual framework of heaven and earth was inadequate for it. And he posed it as if it was a conflict. Because of science, we don't believe in heaven. And I would rather have said, well, because of science, we don't have the same conception of heaven. Not that there is no possible conception of heaven, because that's just more than the power of science can give you.
Bob Russell stuck with science, eventually getting a doctorate in physics, but he always felt that there were questions science couldn't answer. Today, Russell is the director of the Center for Theology and the Natural Sciences in Berkeley, where his work explores that paradox he first encountered when he was 12.
So science not only is a window on the world, but it's also a window on a world which points beyond itself. The world raises that question, well, why are we here? Why is the world here? Why does it make sense? Why is it so beautiful? Are those valid questions? And if you say, well, they aren't, then that's fine. If you say they are, they lead beyond science into this whole world of aesthetics and morality and religion. Is my dad just gone? And if so, well, what's the meaning of love and building a better relationship and getting an insurance policy and sending kids to college? I mean, what is the broader framework in which all that has meaning? And if there is no framework, then why do you do it? Why do science? And what I'm suggesting is that partly because it's so wonderful and exciting and challenging and fun, but it's also is a connection to, for me at least, to God who's the source of all that is. In a sense, looking at God's handiwork. It's like standing from the Grand Canyon. You have this feeling of, wow, it's huge.
For Philosophy Talk, this is Amy Standen.
Thanks, Amy. Ken, that was a very thoughtful piece from Amy, and it makes me reflect on the rather interesting fact that historically the things that drive people to religion, that is, the things that take the form of a philosophical argument or an argument that could be reconstructed philosophically, tend to be of two almost diametrically opposed types. One is the one we mentioned, the classic design argument that says, look, the world is such a wonderful place. How could that have happened unless a God designed it for us? And the other one kind of says, look, the world is such a place with so many shortcomings.
Yeah.
People die young, that our friendship isn't over. People who do outrageous things seem to thrive. People who live moral lives seem to suffer. There must be more to it than this. There must be a heaven and a hell. So those two arguments, those two positions, seem to me the great things that drive people to religion, and yet they don't necessarily fit very comfortably together.
Well, that's true. That's true. Maybe we can talk to our guest about these matters. Our guest today is one of the world's leading relativistic cosmologists, Professor George Ellis of the University of Cape Town. His scientific work focuses on the question whether or not there was ever a start to the universe, and indeed whether there is only one universe or many. He is renowned also for his bold and innovative contributions to the dialogue between science and religion. Professor Ellis, welcome to Philosophy Talk, and congratulations on your new status as the 2004 Templeton Prize laureate.
Many thanks, and thank you for having me on your show.
Hi, Professor Ellis. This is John Perry. I have to admit, I'm a little awestruck talking to a relativistic cosmologist. I couldn't even spell that, much less do that.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you a question first. Earlier, Ken and I discussed the kind of two different design arguments. The classical one that says, given the way the universe works, somebody must have intervened and designed the particular world we find here on Earth. The other one says, no, you have to go back even further than that. The universe is such a fragile set of constants, basic physical constants, that seem fine-tuned to allow for the emergence of life, and there must have been design behind that. Does either or both of those arguments among the things that appeal to you?
Yeah, in a sense, the old design arguments, God designing giraffes and zebras and so on, that switch to God, if you take the creator God behind the universe, it's switched to, in effect, God designing the laws of physics. And the thing about it is that if you look at the way the laws work, they are truly wondrous in what happens, because there are these electrons and protons interacting through the electromagnetic force, which in the end is what makes our bodies function. And they do so in such a way as to allow us to exist with consciousness arising out of our brains. Now, you mentioned the fine-tuning, but I want to emphasize that as a cosmologist, one imagines universes with different laws of physics, different kinds of matter in existence, and so on. And what you can show fairly conclusively is almost any changes you make to the laws of physics and the whole system simply doesn't work. You don't get protons or neutrons, atoms don't form, or the DNA doesn't have the right angle to close up on itself. All sorts of things goes wrong, and so there is an incredible fine-tuning in terms of possible universes out of which we could have been made. This one is an extraordinary special universe.
Yeah, okay, so it's an extraordinarily special universe.
Yeah.
Lots of possible universes in which we wouldn't be here, matter
That's right.
like this wouldn't be here, and I mean, they would probably last for a short time, or lots of bizarre
never
possibilities.
get cool enough, or
Yeah, but I don't know what that shows. I mean, I think it shows. I mean, one might think it shows that we're extraordinarily lucky in some ways. I mean, it's just luck, It's just blind chance that this universe is actual rather than one of those other ones.
There are two different ways of being lucky, and I think it's really important to distinguish them. One is just plain luck. There's one universe and things just happen to be this way. They could have been other ways, and it's just this incredible chance that happened. Now, the point is, in that use of the word luck or chance, you're not saying that it's a probable universe. You're admitting it's incredibly improbable, but just out of all of those improbable universes, the one which allows us just happened to be. Okay. This must be contrasted with the multiverse, the idea that there's millions and millions of universes, or at least millions of regions like our bit that are expanding, and these are all different. They expand different rates. They've got different physical constants and so on. That's a much stronger kind of case, because in that case your argument is, look, there's these zillions and zillions of universes, and most of them it doesn't work out, but look, there's so many of them that there's a good chance in one or two of them it'll function, and so of course we then are in one or two of them. So if you want to try this as an explanation, the first kind of chance admits everything is terribly improbable, and scientists don't like that. It doesn't lead anywhere. The second one you can start to play with. You can start and try and doing statistics on this ensemble of universes and so on. And so that's the one which I would say is most popular as a purely scientific explanation.
No, I mean, but, the fact of the matter is, I mean, I may be corrected, but I'm inclined to think there's just one universe, and it's the only universe we make observations in. That is, when you're talking about an ensemble of universes or possibilities, you're adopting a perspective that no human has. Our only perspective is in this universe, and we know it's fine-tuned. The probability is 1. So isn't there something a little fishy about the reasoning that does statistics on a bunch of possibilities when the only observation that we have to work with is the one that gives it a probability of 1 that the universe is fine-tuned? I don't know if I said that correctly, but I'm sure you get the drift.
You're talking the way which I very much like. Just one point about it. This idea of multiverses was explored by science fiction writers a very long time ago. There's a book called Star Maker by Olaf Stapledon that is justly famous for its fantastic vision of a god creating universe after universe after universe, most of which are failures, but one or two of them work. The idea of the multiverse now is being proposed by quite a number of very serious scientists, including Professor Sir Martin Rees, the Astronomer Royal of Great Britain, who's written a number of books about it. And the thing is, the reason he is proposing it is he does realize the fine-tuning. He's looked at this, he's looked at all of these coincidences that are needed between all the forces of nature, and so he's really struck by the fine-tuning, and that's why he proposes the multiverse. Now, my problem with this is it scientific or not? And the point is, in any scientific theory, you've got to be able to do some observations to check your hypothesis, and then you come back and you say, look, it's a good hypothesis or bad. Now, the problem is, in this case, there's not a single observation you can do, because all of these other universes either are beyond our horizon. We have a horizon in the universe, and you can't see beyond it because light hasn't been able to travel since the beginning of the universe to us from greater distances. So one possibility is there's all of these bits attached to us in our own universe, but beyond testing. And so never, it's not just that, there's no new telescope you can build. There's no new thing which will be created. As long as you believe in relativity, never, ever will we ever have data.
Right.
That makes it metaphysics to me, not physics.
Well, it sounds like it sounds like we're in John and my realm, the realm of philosophy. We'll take this matter up some more after a short break. You're listening to Philosophy Talk.
Professor Ellis, I want to pick up on one thing you said. The philosopher David Hume has this lovely passage where he says, well, even if you accept the argument from design, how do you know that you get anything like the Christian God, the omnipotent, perfect God? You might get some very imperfect God that botched up thousands of worlds before he hit on one even as good as this one. Now, I suspect that the spiritual realities that the Templeton Foundation is excited about, and the ones I would love to believe in, aren't adolescent gods spinning out dozens of really fouled up universes, and they're not evil demons spinning out well-designed universes in order to laugh at the poor residents of them, but something that meets more of our traditional religious needs. So granting the fine-tuning argument for the sake of argument, how do we get something out of that's kind of religiously palatable?
What I would say here is we must look at the different kinds of data about the universe. Now, we get data from the big telescopes, the kind of thing on which we know the universe is expanding, where we measure the microwave background and all that. That's one kind of data. But we are beings living in the universe, and because we're living in it, we're made of the stuff of the universe. Our own experience is also data about the universe, and so that's a different kind of data which we also have to include. Now, traditional physical cosmology doesn't look at that, but as philosophers, this is definitely part of what one looks when one was looking at the scene as a whole. And so then, as was mentioned earlier, and what was something that you two said, two of the domains which lie right outside are ethics and aesthetics. And so the key issue here is, are those telling us anything about the universe as such, or are they kind of freakish byproducts of the immaterial forces at work, and they actually don't mean anything? And so I think that's the kind of issue which I would move to next.
Yeah, look, I want to ask you, those are important issues, and I think we should talk about them. But I still want to take it back a step, because I'm still puzzled about something. Suppose that we grant the multiverse, and that our universe is only one out of a multiplicity of possibilities, and this fine-tuned thing, these fine-tuning of these cosmological constants is all that makes us possible, right? And I suppose you want to ask the question, well, why this one? And you want some explanation for that. And the explanation is supposed to be, well, it's God had some purpose. But I think that's a non-explanation, right? I think because on the one hand, you could just have the universe and the bare fact of it, and you could say it's unexplainable. It's just the bare fact. Or you could say, well, there's God and He has some purpose, but we have no idea how the universe relates to God's purposes, how it could even achieve God's purposes, what God's purpose could be in creating this thing. So it's no better than...
So Ken, our two questions are really related. That is, if you say something's responsible for the fine-tuning, how do you know what? And you should be careful not hypothesizing more than is needed to explain the fine-tuning. And ethics and all that, I guess, has to be appealed to round out the picture.
Right, but I'm also saying, Professor Ellis, that I think maybe the fine-tuning itself does not have any ultimate explanation. It's just the brute fact at the foundation of the universe. I mean, explanation stops somewhere. Why not there?
I would accept that as one logical argument, logical position, and if you take that position, then that is a coherent position. Scientists are always looking for unification. They want to bring more and more data within their capacity of understanding within unified theories. That's one of the huge movements in science. And so a theory that you had like that, which sort of said that about the universe, and then somewhere else there's ethics and aesthetics existing with absolutely no link, that is a weaker kind of theory with less explanatory power than one that tries to pull them together and to say there's a common thing which underlies both ethics and aesthetics and the existence of the universe. So that's a much more unified theory with much greater explanatory power.
I see the line. We have a lineup of callers. Let some of them in to join our conversation. Malada in Sunnyvale. Do I got that right?